Hello and welcome again to the Interfaith Roundtable. I'm Cantor Mark Perman. Deciding today to take a risk and to sort of do the show as a teaching, to just kind of connect with my audience, all of you, thousands out there, whoever you are, or hundreds, or 10, to talk a little bit about the Interfaith Roundtable, what it is, why I decided to create it. And the Interfaith Roundtable is really an opportunity for people of different faiths, hence the title, to come together and talk about their experience with Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's a chance for you to perhaps get to know people of faith who, you might have certain assumptions about, but not really know them. Very often people have very complex and different kinds of views and not perhaps cookie-cutter views that you might read about in the paper or see on television. And we've had quite a variety of guests on the program on the Interfaith Roundtable, which airs every month. If you have an idea for guests, if you would like to be a guest yourself, you have some suggestions, or if you'd like to be in our studio audience, all you have to do is send me an email at mjperman9@gmail.com, mjperman9@gmail.com. I am Cantor Mark Perman of the Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation in Simsbury, and many people ask, well, what is a cantor? Everybody seems to know what a rabbi is, but not everybody knows what a cantor is. So a cantor is a spiritual leader, a teacher, somebody who's responsible for choirs, adult choirs, children's choirs, teen choirs, working on what's called bar and bat mitzvah in cooperation with a rabbi. And a bar and bat mitzvah basically is a ceremony of a child coming to age as an adult in the Jewish community at the age of 13. So we teach trope, the musical symbols for the Torah. We teach the meaning of bar and bat mitzvah. We teach the history of Judaism. So we overlap in our functions with that of the rabbi. Rabbi means teacher. And cantor, as a matter of fact, cantor is not a word we typically ascribe to the Jewish tradition and the Jewish faith. It actually took on that name later to give people a broader idea of what it really means. The Hebrew is chazan, and chazan means shliach tzibur, or prayer leader. Someone who leads the prayers, who teaches, who guides the service, and helps to bring meaning to the entire experience in conjunction with the rabbi and in conjunction with the congregation. So I became a cantor, and many people ask that question, well, why did you do this? I'd been in the performing world, been teaching, been in the theater, been in broadcasting, and it happened, and often going towards a more spiritual path or a more quote-unquote religious path, but we'll talk about that in a bit, comes from a certain experience in your life. In this case, it was the loss of a parent. And my father was a very deeply spiritual person who loved to meditate and loved to study even Christian science as well as Judaism, believed in the power of God to heal. So when he passed rather suddenly, I felt obviously the loss and the pain and began to search out spiritual answers and got involved with a congregation in New York that inspired me by virtue of community, by virtue of building a more vibrant commitment towards creating a sacred community and one of faith, one of social action in which people put their religious views into action in terms of trying to help the world. That's called Tikkun Olam. The congregation is B'nai Jeshurun in New York, but there I began to become more of a committed Jewish person and do a lot of interfaith work as well, and that took me on a path towards doing this as a profession at the age of 29, going to Hebrew Union College, to Jerusalem for a year, and becoming a professional in the world of sacred music. So that leads me to perhaps sing something, which in my mind, music has the power not only to stimulate spiritual growth or comprehension or understanding or reflection, but it has the power, of course, to touch us emotionally. Sometimes you can hear somebody give a speech or a talk and you might not remember much of what they said, but you might hear a song and then you start humming that song or humming that melody, and suddenly it takes on a greater meaning for you. So I'd like to hum, or actually do what's called a nigun, a wordless melody. A a tune that has no words to it, but yet if you hear it, it stimulates hopefully something. And the Hasidim believed that the nigun had the power to illuminate the God within us, to raise our spirits and our hearts towards what's called hitlavut, a sense of joy with the divine. And people who didn't know the Hebrew could pray it because they didn't have to worry about language. So here's a nigun, which you're free to try at home. Or some people say nigun, a wordless melody, N-I-G-G-U-N. La 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 la. You may try this at home. La 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 la. La 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 la. So why is it important for me and for others, of course not just me, to be involved in this interfaith work? Well, it's not to compromise our faith or to sell out on our faith or to try to universalize it. It's to teach respect, tolerance, although I don't like tolerance. It's more respect and appreciation and an understanding of other faiths. For Passover this year, and when you see this program, it will be May, but recording in April and just reflecting on Passover over the last few weeks, I got to attend one wonderful Seder, got to lead another Seder at a congregation in Winstead, but also got to lead a Seder at a church in Middletown for a Reverend Stephen Vaughn, who actually was a guest on this show. And I found it very powerful and very compelling to lead a Seder for Christians, many of them African Americans, because we seem to resonate with that journey from slavery to freedom, the African American experience, the Jewish experience. And we also talked a little bit about the idea that the Passover Seder is not just about a historical reflection. It's also about the idea that there's something within us that holds us enslaved. There's something within us that keeps us enslaved, whether to old ideals, to old beliefs from family that we haven't been able to shake, to definitions about ourselves that might be negative, to certain materialistic aspirations that might be fleeting. So when we talk slavery, when we talk liberation, when we talk each year about crossing through the Red Sea, through Exodus, from slavery to freedom, it's not just a historical journey, it's one that we're supposed to take today. And we're all supposed to remember that there are slaves in the world today, that there are people slaves to governments, people in prison, workers who work for horrible wages in certain countries, and we end up, of course, buying those products. People who are struggling for freedom in places like Syria or in Africa and so forth, slave trade, sex slaves and so forth, things we read about every day in parts of the world we'd rather not have to think about. So we are commanded to think about them and to pray for Exodus not only for ourselves, but for all people. So we started the Passover Seder and actually ended the Passover Seder with a specific melody for Passover. And it's to a text called Adir Hu. And that goes like this. Adir Hu, Adir Hu, Yivne veto bekaruv, bimhera, bimhera, v'yamenu bekaruv, el b'nei, b'nei bitcha bekaruv. And again, if people don't know the words, Lai, 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 lai. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. People always ask, or we discuss, as we move along a little bit, what religion is versus spirituality. And we have something in Judaism called Kebba and Kavanah. Kebba is structure, how the prayers are done, the format, the order. Seder, in fact, means order. Siddur means prayer book. So we start with a structure, we start with a Kebba, that's religious belief, teaching. Halakha, what's called Jewish law, the basic core. But spirituality, or Kavanah, is something we need to attach to it to make it meaningful. It's something we need to bring to it from our own experience, to make the words on the page come alive, to make the worship experience not seem cold and sterile. Because if we wait for the people up on the bima or the dais to inspire or move us, maybe they can or maybe they can't. But we have to do the work in partnership. That involves opening up our hearts and opening up our souls and exploring that which is meaningful for us. People always talk about the Kabbalah. What is the Kabbalah? It's received doctrine. The received doctrine. And the Kabbalah teaches us to be a true mystic, is to be someone who has their feet planted firmly on the ground and their head in the clouds. So you're connected to God, but you're also connected to the practical of daily living, and you try to integrate the two. So a service in which people lecture and people read, in which there's a call and response, but there isn't an engagement of the soul, is challenging. The great theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel, as we hold on, said that we have to make sacred time on Shabbat. So I want you to imagine for a moment that it's Friday night, and you're Jewish, or Sunday, and you're Christian, but Friday night and you're Jewish, darkness is descending, and for the moment of Shabbat evening until Shabbat ends the next night, you're expected to just focus on the moment. You're expected not to engage in work or commerce, really not to travel, not to use money, really not supposed to watch TV either. But the idea is not to restrict. People think of the restrictions for religious people as somewhat restrictions, but they're really not. They're ways to make the experience of living for 24 hours a little bit more holy. We're not supposed to try to gain from the material world. We're not supposed to try to fix things, repair things, put power in ourselves. We're supposed to take the power away from ourselves and put it in the hands of the divine, and trust that we can just be without having to do. How many times in life, especially in today's busy world with family or work obligations or whatever it might be, do we ever take time to just be and just be fully present in the moment? So let's try that for a moment, putting our hands to our sides, sort of like an exercise video. Taking a few deep breaths, perhaps stretching your neck a little bit and allowing yourself to be relaxed. And in just a moment, I'll do a prayer for peace. And once again, it's not only peace politically, it's not only peace for Israel, which is important, not only peace between nations, but peace between families, peace between communities, peace between divergent ideologies. Unfortunately, in our political world, all we hear are people shouting at each other from different political points of view. But imagine if they took some reflection to see if they could really listen to each other and see the validity in the other person's point of view. And maybe that takes a little peace and grounding and reflection that we ourselves are not that important. We're made in God's image, which is called B'Tselem Elohim, made in God's image. And here's a prayer for peace. O say shalom bimromav, O yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. O say shalom bimromav, O yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael, V'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Everybody would go, Amen. So I have a little Pesach story, and it's an animal rescue story. I'm an animal rescuer, animal lover, and I did this and put it on Facebook, expecting that some people would laugh. Still expecting, as I tell you about it, some people will laugh, but not many did. So I go into the supermarket the other day to pick up food for a guest Cantor who was coming to the synagogue, and I see the lobster tank. And I'm usually depressed by it, but this time it was especially depressing. One lobster was reaching up to try to escape or to reach for food, and one felt the power of living creatures that were suffering. At least I did. Many people walk by it, and maybe I'm especially sensitive, I don't know. So it bothered me from the previous day into the next day. I realized on Saturday I had some time. I might go for a walk down at the beach in Hammonasset. So I decided to do a lobster rescue. People at home might be laughing, I have no idea. So I followed a procedure from a friend who knew how to kind of basically, purchase the lobster, put it on ice, travel with it to Hammonasset, take the rubber bands off the claws, release it into the water. And I thought for a second, I was sure it was going to die along the way. I was sure it might bite me. I was sure people would see me and think I was ridiculous. I was sure a number of steps along the way, it was going to prove to be some kind of a big joke, and I would be scorned for it. It turned out that it was a very amazing, powerful, and meaningful experience basically around Passover, because I understood the meaning of liberating something that had been enslaved, that was suffering, that felt the sun on its back, that felt the sand underneath its claws, that re-experienced being back in the water, that people around looked at this creature and didn't think of it as a piece of food anymore, as something to be boiled alive, rather saw it as something as a living creature and found it intriguing and asked the story, and I told them about it, and I took some pictures and I wrote about it. And gradually the lobster turned around and kind of looked at me. I don't know what was looking at me, or scared or what. But after a few minutes of experimentation, it turned around, went back into the water, and disappeared. And it was free. And it was a very, very powerful, moving experience that even moves me to tears to talk about it today. And as I write about it and put it on Facebook, suddenly other people jumped and said, my God, I've had similar experiences in terms of feeling horrible about the way, factory farmed animals are treated, knowing that sometimes when I take a bite out of a pork or a chicken or a cow, that it might have suffered greatly, or veal especially. And I give money to organizations and so forth. But that story opened my eyes, made me feel something, touched me, and gave me a sense of an understanding of maybe an element of Passover I hadn't stood before. If you think about it, the lobster is a non-kosher animal. We're not supposed to eat it. Non-kosher fish or whatever it is, crustacean. But the idea of saving or liberating it, or liberating any animal, even a pig, is definitely a Jewish concept or a Christian concept, because it talks about respect for life. Bal tzarei chaim, respect and admiration for life, and the power that gives. So sometimes you think that you might be thinking something alone, and only you are thinking it, but when you do something about it, write about it, reflect on it, suddenly 50, 100, 200 people come out of the woodwork and say, wow, I was thinking of the same thing, but thanks for actually doing it. And another point, as far as faith goes, and I'm sure if there are folks of faith out there or no faith, and this program is for people of all faiths or any faith or no faith. My faith teaches me that Judaism teaches me to work on the problems not only facing the Jewish people, and there are many, Israel, fighting against anti-Semitism, respect for the Jewish people and what we've endured, but also Jewish commitment and continuity, but also respect for the ideals that we all share, whether it's peace or brotherhood or sisterhood, a sense of cooperation, working together, realizing we all descend from the same God, whatever you call it. If you believe in one entity or one deity, we all descend from the same God, which means we are all brothers and sisters. So that which takes me into the larger community and makes me activate my Judaism. And that's one reason for this show. If you feel passionate about activating your Christianity, or activating your Islam, or activating your Hindu faith, or activating your secular humanism, or whatever it might be, and you'd like to explore that more fully, please do. And one way to do it is to get involved in this program, and I can also suggest many other ways as well. To remind you to contact me about the program, that's mjperman9@gmail.com, mjperman9@gmail.com. So they're doing at this juncture, and probably by the time the show airs, it'll be done, but they asked me to give a few tidbits of information to a production of Fiddler on the Roof, which is being done at Avon High School. So I've been doing Fiddler, singing from Fiddler my whole life. So I figured I would bring you the Sabbath prayer. I actually don't know that one as well. I'll do it. I'll do that one, because they asked me to help interpret that one. May the Lord protect and defend you. May God shield you from shame. May you come to be in Israel a shining name. May you be like Ruth and like Esther. May you be deserving of praise. Favor them, O Lord, and keep them from the stranger's ways. May God bless you and grant you long life. May God make you good husbands and wives. May the Lord protect and defend you. May God preserve you from pain. Favor them, O Lord, and bless them with peace. So hear our Sabbath prayer. Amen. Another aspect of Judaism that's very important, and it's very important for all faiths, of course, is healing. We know that people are sick and people will die, and sometimes we pray and people get worse and die anyway. But healing is not the same as cure. So often in Judaism we do a prayer called the Mishaberach, which is to offer healing. So I share that Mishaberach with you to offer healing for you if you're going through a hard time, if you're struggling with illness, if there are people in your family who are struggling with illness, physical, mental, or emotional, if there are people in your immediate sphere, if there are caregivers, and we all know people, and you could be one of them, caring for people who are sick. I cared for my mother from community to community for 10 years who had dementia. So we have this Mishaberach prayer, which the setting is written by the late Debbie Friedman, and it goes like this. Mishaberach avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu, mikor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. So Avotenu means our Father. You know the Avinu prayer, the Lord's Prayer. Imotenu means our mothers. Refuah shlema, healing of body and soul. Those are all about healing things. So some questions, and anyway, if anybody has names they'd like to share on the program in the future, people who are in need of healing, send me those names through my email once again, mjperman9@gmail.com, Cantor Mark Perman, FEJC, Emek, Shalom, Simsbury, and we can say a healing prayer on the program for those who are in need of it. If it wasn't for religion, would there would there be less violence in the world? And that's one that keeps coming up, and that's something we could discuss forever and have experts in far more knowledgeable than me. But I would argue that it's not necessarily the religion that causes that violence, it's a misunderstanding of it. There are people who think that their way is the way, and we have extremists, of course, in Islam, we have extremists in Judaism, we have extremists in all faiths, Christianity, people who believe that their way is the way. But that isn't what religious teachings really teach. They teach tolerance, respect, love, brotherhood, sisterhood. Jesus, whose name was Yeshua, said, love thy neighbor as thyself. That's a Jewish teaching. And of course became a Christian teaching, but it started in the Jewish faith. So if people use religion to perpetuate violence, if they really believe they're going to take quotes from Torah or from the Quran literally and extract them, isolate them from their context and use them to perpetuate violence, in my view, they're going against the tenets of their faith, which doesn't teach that at all. It's a misinterpretation. The other question, if there's a God, why do so many bad things happen? And I would suggest to read a book called Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Harold Kushner. And he talks about that, and there are many people who talk about that, and it's not something we can answer, but it's something we can definitely explore. The other thing, that God answers prayers, but sometimes the answers are different than what we believe they might be, and sometimes the answers are no. Finally, our faiths overlap, and there are so many ways we can discuss that, and that's one reason I do the program, the Interfaith Roundtable, is to show that really, whether we talk before the show or talk afterwards or laugh and share that which we find passionate in our faiths or respectfully disagree, we are talking about many of the same things. Respect for life, respect for tradition, love of family, love of the divine, however you identify God, whether it's in the form of a Trinity or the form of one God, and that we have an obligation to bring ourselves together. So thank you for joining me on this special edition of the Interfaith Roundtable. Next month we will have a guest as usual. I'm Cantor Mark Perman, and I'll throw out that email once more because sometimes I feel like it's so fast, maybe you don't get it. MJ Perman, P-E-R-M-A-N, MJ Perman, and the number 9, @gmail.com. I'll thank Althea and Jason and Karen and the gentleman in the studio I don't know. I'll thank him as well. But thank you for joining me on the Interfaith Roundtable. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. And may my heart be open to every broken soul, to every orphan life, to every stumbler walking unknown and groping in the shadow. May my heart be open. Bless these eyes, purify them to see man's beauty rise in the Word, and the glory of my people in its redeemed land, spreading forth its fragrance over the May my heart be open to every broken soul.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.